Welcome to the PlayCreate Podcast. I'm Kirsten Gunnerud.
Hi, I'm Jill Johnson.
Welcome to 2020.
I know, it's 2020.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
We're 3 weeks, is it 3 weeks into it?
Yes.
How's it going so far?
It's good. I love this time because I think there's so much pressure at the beginning of the year to make resolutions and what's it going to be, and especially with it being a new decade too. But I kind of like looking back at what happened in the last decade because it's pretty phenomenal when you look at a 10-year span.
Oh my gosh.
The changes, especially, when you have kiddos, to see what happens in a 10-year span for them. And so I love kind of taking stock. And I think that's really important for where we're coming from, is that we can always show up to each day like it is a new year. I think a lot of times we put pressure on really big changes, and a lot of people probably have given up some resolutions, or maybe you're going hard at it, but this is a good time to always take stock. And I think it's like we talk about goals and everything else that we've spoken of, about how it's mutable and how it changes. And when we use improv ideas, we're talking about all of this can change on a dime, and it's okay. Like you're only accountable to you. You only have to show up to you. So don't put so much pressure. And it's good to look at why we make resolutions. Is it really for the best of us, or is it for something else? Because a lot of times when I notice mine fall through, it's because I think I have an expectation outside of me that I'm trying to meet. So those kind of resolutions, I think, fall hollow and don't get grounded.
I hesitate to say this because I don't know that this is necessarily fair, but in my experience for myself with resolutions, and to some degree observing them, I think they tend to be, I need to fix this.
Yes.
I need to fix this about myself. And I think that's part of why they don't work.
Yes.
Because when our mindset is on that, what I need to fix instead of what I want to create, the energy around it is so different, right?
It is.
Something's wrong with me, and if I don't fix this, I'm not going to be right, or I'm not going to be okay, or I'm not going to. And so how can we shift? So let's say maybe you had a resolution and you've already dropped it. To just play with is maybe that's why. And
when you're talking, I keep seeing the word resolution, and it's like re-solution. And just looking at what's a different solution for it, what's a different way. And when we talked with Rob, we talked about the territory. So maybe that wasn't the path.
Yes.
Look at the broader territory. What's in that territory that would be another solution?
Yeah. Do you have you, so what I tend to not do resolutions, and I tend to play with a theme of what it is that I want to create in that next year. And almost every year I do it on New Year's Eve. I'll write like a journal entry, and then I don't look at it again. And then the next New Year's Eve, I'll look back at that journal, and almost every single year, I think there's maybe been 1 year where I wasn't blown away how exactly what I wrote is what the year ended up really being kind of centered around. And so this year, I can't even remember some of the stuff I wrote. And actually after New Year's Eve, one of the things that I really want to make this year about for me, and ironically, is having more self-discipline. And discipline and me, that word don't go very well together. And so it's not so much about self-discipline, but it is about really, really getting clear on, this is what I want to create. And if I don't dedicate this time to it, and if I'm not willing to say no to some of this other stuff that's just constantly like, hey, over here, and hey, over here, it's going to continue to hold me back from some of these things that I really, really, really know in here it's time to create. So it's about getting really clear on that and making choices that speak to that is one of the things I'm working on this year. Is there anything?
Well, it's funny when you were saying that, I think of the word, now I'm getting all into the root meanings of things, and
I love it.
Discipline, I think of the disciple, like being a disciple to your creativity or whatever it is. It means that you're leaning into and really being what it is for that. So that word has a lot of beauty in it besides just a regulator.
Thank you for that, because that word has always been a contraction word for me. So it was really interesting that I was willing to embrace that this year, and you just made it magical.
Oh, it just popped in.
I love that.
Well, and it's funny. So on New Year's Eve, we live in a place where it's all snowy and we're snowmobiling around, and one of our friends has a big party every year, and she's Swedish, so their big thing is eating herring, and it's supposed to bring luck. Well, I hate herring. I hate it. But we all go around this bowl, and we make our intentions, and I'm like, whoa, just so grossed out. But my husband, the side that's Norwegian, which you are, I mean, herring is everything. So I remember 2 years ago, I wanted, because I had such a bad year, I wanted it to be, I'm like, if it's just 1% better, it's going to be great. Yeah. Well, it was 1% better. I was like, okay, well, why don't we go for 100% better, and that was this last year. Yeah. So going into the next one, I was like, well, we're going full, we're adding more digits to that. But we ate a herring for every year of the decade. Oh. So we had 11 total too. So it was a lot of work. But my big thing was just leaning into that it can always be better. And it's not, it's how I approach it and how I want to show up to it versus okay, I have to do this because I don't know what it is. If I look at this past decade, I never would have imagined where I'd be in 2020. Yeah. I had ideas, but none of them were where I am. Right. And so I like the idea of just okay, well, what is it I want to feel? What is it that I want to notice inside of me? That's my regular, we talk about our compass, is my inner compass going towards whatever it might be, whether it's contentment or, clarity or discipline. What is it that I'm wanting to put that towards? Yeah. And then I know I'm aligned, so then I don't get so caught up in what it needs to look like, because it always changes. It's very, it's shape-shifting all the time. Yeah. Yeah. So
that's part of the magic of it.
Yeah.
And we miss that when we get, just like we talked about with Rob, too focused on what we think it should be.
Yes. Yes.
Versus that bigger thing. The other thing that we invited people to do in one of our emails over the break is to think about this moving into the new year, almost like moving, and even into the new decade, almost like you're moving into a new house.
Yes.
And while really it's just a date changing on a calendar, right? Technically speaking, how I love to look at it is it's an opportunity to create new space. Mm-hmm. And it's just that opportunity, like you talked about at the beginning, to kind of reflect on where things are and all that, but also to really create and look forward. And so we talked about in that, looking at if you're moving, you tend to go through stuff and get rid of anything, hopefully anything that no longer is serving you and isn't going to serve you in your new space. Yep. You tend to really take stock of what really matters and what you really want to have in that new space. And sometimes intentionally, sometimes almost just as part of the hope and excitement of moving into a new place, you start to really think about what you want to create. Yeah. And so doing that as we move into the new year has been, for me, a pretty powerful thing to be thinking about. And I don't know why, 2020, there's something about, I can't stop saying it.
Yeah. Well, it's been in our, you think of hindsight 2020 and, 2020 vision. And, there's so many things that use those numbers anyway. But it's just weird to even think we're here. When you think about as a kid, thinking of being in the year 2000 and then being in 20 years into it, it's just,
Yeah.
Who would have thunk? And so I think that's the big thing about it is it's just kind of surreal.
Yeah.
To be in this decade. And it's also a big decade for us because, it's a marking of change. We're going to see our kids be with us and possibly move out by the end of the decade.
Yeah.
Which will make me cry. But that's, there's all these big things. And then us as women, we're changing in our decades. So there's just a lot coming on. And I think, I love the idea of the house because, it's so easy to get cluttered. We see it all the time. It's so easy to get cluttered in our houses, to, just have stuff everywhere, to feel like you're always clean or there's always stuff to fix or there's always something to do. But it's a really good metaphor because that's how it is internally. We're always trying to clear out the chatter. We're always trying to make sure that our physical body is working well, that we're feeding it and giving it nutrition, and we're cleaning it, and we're taking care of our emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual bodies.
Yeah.
So it's really aligned because you look at your house, and I think people can talk about this, is when it feels good, how you feel. But, when you're also, some people are also, living without a home, or they're, living, one of our great guys here, Nick, lived in his van, and, there's all these different ways of how we move around the world, but how do we move within ourselves? And how do we show up to ourselves? And so I think that's a great way to go into this decade as well, is how do we want to unpack and repack and be aware of and cleanse and celebrate and do all these great things that this body is doing for us all the time. A lot of it on autopilot.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
And I think when you do all those things that you just said, again, back to the resolution thing, when you focus on that, you're creating forward. Mm-hmm. You're playing forward. And some of those things that need fixing end up just naturally shifting because you're bringing more joy, because you're focusing on the things that nurture you and feed you and in a different way. And what I've found for me, especially my diet, for example, the more fun I'm having and the more I'm playing and the more I'm stepping into what I've been wanting to do for so long, the healthier I want to eat. Just weird. It's just kind of a natural thing that's just come with it. And so you end up fixing those things anyway, because you're stepping into more of what your heart and soul is longing for.
Yeah, and not judging. I think that's the biggest thing. We were just talking before we started, and I was sharing with Kirsten this poem that I had, and I would think it's a good segue right now because
it is.
It's all about the idea of letting things come in and not being so hypercritical, I'm having fun right now, but my diet's very different than what you're talking about. Last night we were loving fondue and whiskey, so nice. And I was having fun, but it's definitely doing something different to my body. But I think it's funny because I think that alignment and being okay with where you are.
Yeah.
So it's by Rumi, and it's called The Guest House.
Yeah.
This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
I love that. And
I think that's the idea of, things do come up, and, we're not saying that, it's 2020 and it's going to be just sweet.
Oh gosh.
And easy.
I wish we were, but we're not.
Could be. But the other thing is that things happen. We are also in a decade, I think, where a lot of our friends are going to see parents either come into their homes to take care of, or we're going to, send them with angel wings, so I think there's all these things that are coming too. So we have to just know that there's the beauty is also in the sorrows, in the malice, in the, we have mean moments, we have stuff that we're always working through.
Yeah.
And so I think being gentle with ourselves as these things come up are the biggest hurdles, and the best way to go into each day is, not being so hard when things aren't just perfectly aligned, and when it doesn't feel magical. But then you get to the other side of it and you're that much more aware, you're that much more compassionate, you're that much more open to something that you wouldn't have been if you wouldn't have gone through it.
I just had a very interesting experience, and I've had this experience before, and I still haven't ever quite completely learned this. I don't know that I ever will. I think this is just part of being human. But I had a couple of hard days, and the whole time I was like, but I know this is good, and I know, and what I was actually doing in that process was not fully letting myself feel what I was feeling. Because I know through this work how important the hard stuff is, and how it takes us somewhere, and there's always a gift in it. I know that, but focusing on that side of it instead of truly feeling and being where I was kept me from processing what I needed to process. Yeah. And the minute I was willing to acknowledge and say out loud, I'm not well today. Yeah. Like, I'm not okay today. I'm not okay, but I'll be okay. Like, as soon as I left that part off and just fully accepted where I was, it shifted so quickly. And I think we have such a natural resistance to allowing ourselves to feel those things and be in that place. And yet, ironically, just accepting it and noticing it and being with it, it tends to just kind of dissolve.
Yes. Well, it's like anything, like, happiness and joy always go away, but we're not trying to journal about it or go to a therapist about it, like all that stuff that we've talked about. But it comes in, and it's a work in progress. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to just be like, when you're crazy sick and you have to-dos and everything going on, to just be like, okay, I'm sick, or just taking that day, whatever it might be. Or if you have to show up to stuff, even though you're not all there and you just want to hide. Yeah. It's just that ongoing graceness to ourselves. Yeah. That's a new word, but
I love graceness. Graceness.
So what do we want to do for everyone? Because I think, going back to your analogy and metaphor of the house, and thinking of Rumi's idea of the guest house, how do we look at ourselves as that house, and what do we want to do within ourselves as we go forward in the year? And I think it's just every day it might be a little different, and I think for me it's always about being open and showing up and flexibility and all that. But I'm also really aware. I remember one year I wanted to be more grace, like I wanted more grace, and it was a really hard year. But it taught me a lot about grace. So I always joke, like, be careful for what you wish for. True. Because it shows up, but never in the way you think it is. Yeah. And so just being open to what might show up. Yeah. And then looking at the hindsight 2020 of, oh my God, that's exactly what I asked for.
Do you regret asking for it?
No, I don't. But I'm much more aware of how I phrase things. Yeah. Just in the sense of, I think there's a lot of power in our words. Absolutely. A lot of power in an energy around how we look at things and do things. And so when you're putting certain things out there, it does come to you, and you just have to be aware of how it might come. Yeah. Asking for one thing, it will show up in many other ways. Yeah. And it's like, I can't remember, there's so many different like little stories about, like God sends, the guy is asking for, something, and he sends them like a fish, everything, a boat, and then he finally dies, and he's like, where were you? He's like, I sent it in so many ways. Right. Like, so I think that's one of those things, is just be open. because the gifts come in a lot of different forms.
Yeah. So is the invitation that you're throwing out to everyone, if I'm hearing right, just to make sure we're clear on that, when I sent out the thing about the house, and actually when I'm thinking about it, I think that was more external.
Yep.
Like what do you want to take with you? What don't you? I love the idea of focusing that a little bit more internally.
Yep.
Into how is it you want to feel? How is it you want to be and experience? Is that what you're thinking?
And like, what's the energy you want to evoke? You know, what is it that you are looking for to feel at the end of the day? And when you wake up, you know, what are those little driving forces that even when it is hard, there's that spark that's kind of lighting the way down the road, even if it doesn't seem like you can catch it at the moment, it's there.
I love that. And if as you're listening, something to think about too, as you're listening to us talk about this, it's possible that something's sparking for you right now. Like there's a little word that's in your head, or there's a feeling that you're having in your body, and to just take a note of that. Yes, it's awesome to sit down with your journal and a glass of wine or whatever it might be for a little bit and play with this, but also notice what's coming up right now, because that might be one of your key answers.
Well, and the big thing is it doesn't have to be a big process.
Right.
You know, so just one little taking stock, just thinking of a word like you just said, or, you know, just acknowledging it in such a simple way is really great, because then you're not putting so much pressure. I think another thing that happens with resolutions is that we need to like make them look good, or we need to write it just right, or we need to clear out the area and do this whole thing. And sometimes it's just a walk or just taking stock for like 5 minutes and just noticing.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. 2020, here we come.
Here we come. I know, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But we're excited, and we're going to start playing with some new ideas as well as we come into
podcast.
Yeah,
keep going.
Well, I think what we're thinking about is going into taking what we've brought from the first, which is our ideas around improv and play, but also moving forward as more topics come up to us and more themes, because what we notice is there's so many exciting things that bubble up that we don't want to just keep it into one little, like, this is the way we do it, because we're always changing, as we've been saying through this whole thing, and we're always discovering something new. So I think this next season is a lot about the discovery, and also what we are seeing with people that we're really amazed by, that are doing other types of work, but we see the play in it and the creativity in it and just the way they show up to life.
I'm so excited for all of the guest speakers that we've been talking about bringing on, and I think it's going to be a really, really fun. We're going to grow. We're going to learn. Hopefully all of us together, and I'm excited. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Have fun with your invitation, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Bye.
Thanks.